The throne room of the Valorian Empire stretched for half a mile, its walls made of black crystal that hummed with ancient power. Emperor Kralthax sat upon his throne of bones, watching his daughter with eyes that held no warmth. Princess Liara stood before him, her 4 arms hanging at her sides, her silver skin marked with the shame lines that her people drew upon the weak. She had failed again. The combat trials were meant to prove the worth of royal blood. Every prince and princess of Valoria had to fight, had to show strength, had to earn the right to breathe the same air as warriors. But Liara could not win. She could not even survive a single round without her guards rushing in to save her life. The nobles whispered behind their hands. They called her the Broken Princess. They said she was a mistake, a defect in the perfect bloodline of the empire. Some even dared to suggest that she should be sent to the mining colonies, where the weak ones were sent to work until their bodies gave out. Emperor Kralthax had heard all of this. He had ignored it for years, hoping that time would fix his daughter, that she would suddenly become strong like her brothers. But hope was a luxury that an emperor could not afford. His enemies were watching. The other noble houses were circling like predators, waiting for any sign of weakness in the royal family. Something had to change. The emperor had sent scouts across the galaxy, searching for something that could help his daughter. They had brought back weapons, trainers, chemical enhancements, and even illegal cybernetic implants. Nothing worked. Liara remained weak, unable to fight, unable to survive in a world that respected only power. Then the scouts brought back something different. They brought back a human. His name was Marcus Cole, and he was found on a prison transport that the Valorian military had captured during a border skirmish. The humans were a young species, barely 1,000 years into space travel. They had no empires, no great fleets, no weapons that could threaten the old powers of the galaxy. Most species ignored them entirely. But the scout who captured Marcus had noticed something strange. When the prison transport was attacked, most of the prisoners had panicked or frozen in fear. The human had done neither. He had grabbed a broken piece of metal and killed 3 Valorian soldiers before they could bring him down. He had fought like a creature possessed, like something from the dark times before civilization. The scout had been curious. Humans were supposed to be weak, fragile things that died from the smallest injury. Their bodies had no natural armor, no claws, no poison glands, yet this one had fought like a warrior born. So the scout brought him back to Valoria, and Emperor Kralthax looked upon the human with interest for the first time. Marcus Cole stood in chains before the throne, his body covered in bruises and cuts from his capture. He was small by Valorian standards, barely reaching the chest of an average soldier. His skin was a strange pinkish color, and his eyes held a fire that the emperor had not seen in years. There was no fear in those eyes, only anger. The emperor spoke in the common tongue of the galaxy. His voice was like grinding stones. He asked the human what he was, what had made him fight so hard against impossible odds. Marcus looked up at the giant alien emperor and smiled. It was not a pleasant smile. He said that he was a soldier, trained in the ways of war since he was old enough to walk. He said that humans did not know how to give up, that something in their blood refused to accept defeat. He said that he would rather die fighting than live as a slave. The emperor was amused. He had killed thousands of enemies in his lifetime, and many of them had claimed to be unbreakable. All of them had broken eventually. But there was something in the human's voice that made him pause. A certainty that went beyond mere words. The emperor made a decision that shocked his entire court. He ordered the human to be cleaned, fed, and given quarters in the royal wing. He announced that the human would become his daughter's companion, her teacher in the ways of survival. If the human could not make Liara strong, then nothing could. And if the human tried to harm her, he would be executed in the most painful way the Empire had ever invented. The nobles laughed behind their hands, They thought the emperor had finally lost his mind. What could a weak, fragile human teach a Valorian princess? The idea was absurd. Liara was also confused and angry. She did not want a companion, especially not some strange creature from a primitive planet. She had been given trainers before, the best warriors in the Empire, and none of them had helped. Why would this tiny, soft-skinned thing be any different? Marcus was taken to his new quarters, a room larger than any house he had ever lived in. Guards stood outside his door at all times. Monitoring devices watched his every move. He was a prisoner in a golden cage, given comfort but not freedom. But Marcus did not care about comfort or freedom. He cared about survival, and he understood something that the Valorians did not. He had been given an opportunity to learn, to adapt, to find a way out of this nightmare. All he had to do was stay alive long enough to take it. The next morning, Liara was brought to his quarters. She stood in the doorway, her forearms crossed over her chest, her eyes filled with resentment. She was tall, nearly 8 feet, with the same silver skin as her father. But where the emperor was thick with muscle and power, Liara was thin and fragile. Her movements were hesitant, uncertain. She looked like a creature that had been beaten down so many times that she had forgotten how to stand up. Marcus studied her carefully. He had seen this before, in the young soldiers who came to training camps back on Earth. The ones who had been told their whole lives that they were worthless, that they would never amount to anything. Breaking them down was easy. Any bully could do that. But building them up, teaching them to find the strength they never knew they had, that was the hard part. He asked her to sit. She refused. He asked her again, more firmly this time. She looked at him with something like surprise, as if no one had ever spoken to her in that tone before. Then she sat. Marcus began to ask her questions, not about fighting or training, but about her life. What did she enjoy? What made her happy? What did she dream about when no one was watching? Liara did not know how to answer. No one had ever asked her these things. Her entire existence had been defined by her failures, by the things she could not do. She had never been allowed to think about what she wanted. Marcus nodded, as if he had expected this answer. He told her that before she could become a warrior, she needed to become something else first. She needed to become herself. She needed to find the fire inside her that the world had tried to put out. Liara did not understand what he meant. She asked him how she was supposed to fight when her body was weak, when her reflexes were slow, when every other Valorian was bigger and stronger than her. Marcus smiled again, and this time there was warmth in it. He told her a secret, something that humans had learned long ago. Strength was not just about muscles. Speed was not just about reflexes. The greatest weapon in any fight was the mind. A clever fighter could defeat a strong fighter every single time if they knew how to think, how to plan, how to see what their enemy could not see. He told her about Earth, about the history of his people. Humans had no claws, no armor, no natural weapons. They were small and soft and easy to kill, but they had conquered their entire planet. They had hunted creatures 10 times their size into extinction. They had built weapons that could destroy mountains and medicines that could cure diseases. They had done all of this not through strength, but through intelligence, through cooperation, through sheer stubborn refusal to accept their limitations. Liara listened, and for the first time in her life, she felt something stir inside her chest. Not hope, not exactly, but curiosity, a desire to know more, to understand how this strange little creature could speak with such confidence about things that seemed impossible. Marcus told her that their training would begin the next day, but it would not be like any training she had experienced before. He would not try to make her stronger or faster. He would teach her to see the world differently, to think in ways that her enemies could not predict. He would teach her the human way of war. The guards outside the door exchanged confused glances. They had expected the human to be terrified, to beg for mercy, to break down under the pressure of his situation. Instead, he seemed completely calm, as if he was exactly where he wanted to be. None of them understood what was happening. None of them realized that the Emperor had made a mistake, not by bringing the human to his daughter. The mistake was thinking that the human could be controlled. Marcus Cole had been a prisoner, a slave, a thing to be used and discarded. But he was also something else. He was a teacher, and teachers have a way of changing the world. That night, Liara lay in her bed and stared at the ceiling. For years, she had dreamed of escape, of finding some way out of the life that had been forced upon her. She had imagined running away to the outer colonies, changing her name, becoming someone new. But she had never actually done it. Fear had always held her back. Now, something was different. The human's words echoed in her mind, strange and confusing and somehow exciting. He had looked at her without pity, without disgust. He had spoken to her like she mattered, like she was capable of more than everyone believed. She did not know if she could trust him. She did not know if his promises were real or just empty words. But for the first time in years, she was willing to find out. In his quarters, Marcus Cole was also awake. He sat by the window looking out at the alien stars, thinking about everything that had happened. He had been captured, tortured, transported across the galaxy to serve an alien emperor. By all logic, he should be terrified. But Marcus had stopped being afraid a long time ago. Fear was a luxury, and he had none left to spare. All he had was his training, his experience, and his unshakable belief that humans could survive anything. The Valorians thought they understood war. They thought strength and speed and aggression were all that mattered. They had no idea what humans were capable of when they were pushed into a corner. Marcus smiled in the darkness. The princess was broken, yes, but broken things could be fixed. And when she was ready, when he had taught her everything he knew, she would become something that the galaxy had never seen before. She would become unstoppable. The training began with stillness. Marcus made Liara sit in the garden for hours, watching the creatures that lived there. She was confused at first, angry even. She had expected physical drills, combat exercises, something that would make her body stronger. Instead, she was staring at insects. Marcus explained his method with patience. A warrior who cannot observe cannot survive. The greatest fighters in human history were not the ones who could hit the hardest. They were the ones who could see what others missed. They noticed the slight shift in an enemy's weight before an attack. They spotted the hidden weakness in a defense. They read the battlefield like a book, understanding its secrets before anyone else. Liara learned to watch. She studied the way the garden creatures moved, the patterns they followed, the tiny signals they gave before they struck or fled. At first, she saw nothing special. Then slowly, she began to notice things. The way a hunting beetle would freeze for half a second before it pounced. The way certain flowers closed when danger was near. The way the wind changed direction before a storm. Her eyes were opening to a world she had never truly seen. After 3 weeks of observation training, Marcus introduced the next phase. He called it tactical thinking. He presented her with puzzles, scenarios, impossible situations where the odds were against her. A single warrior facing 10 enemies. A fleet surrounded by hostile ships. A city under siege with no hope of rescue. He asked her what she would do. Liara's first answers were always the same. Fight harder, strike faster, try to win through pure aggression. These were the answers that every Valorian warrior would give. They were also wrong. Marcus showed her different paths. The single warrior does not fight 10 enemies at once. She separates them, tricks them into fighting each other, uses the environment to create advantages. The surrounded fleet does not charge into battle. It waits for the right moment, finds the gap in the enemy formation, strikes where they least expect. The city under siege does not depend on its walls. It sends agents outside, spreads false information, makes the enemy doubt their own plans. Victory was not about strength, it was about intelligence. Liara struggled with these concepts. Her entire life had taught her that the strong conquered and the weak perished. That was the way of the universe. How could thinking change the outcome of a fight where one side had overwhelming power? Marcus told her a story. Centuries ago, on Earth, there was a small island nation called Britain. They faced an enemy called the Spanish Armada, a fleet so large and powerful that no one believed it could be defeated. The Spanish had more ships, more guns, more soldiers. By every measure of strength, they should have won. But the British did not fight the way the Spanish expected. They used smaller, faster ships. They attacked at night, using fire ships to create chaos. They let the weather and the currents do their work. When the battle was over, the mighty armada was scattered and broken, and tiny Britain had survived. This was the human way. Find the weakness, exploit the advantage. Never fight the battle your enemy wants to fight. Liara began to understand. Months passed. The training intensified. Marcus introduced physical elements, but they were nothing like traditional Valorian combat training. He taught her about pressure points on alien bodies, the specific spots where even the strongest warrior was vulnerable. He showed her how to use her smaller size as an advantage, how to slip through guards that would stop larger fighters, how to strike and disappear before her enemy could react. He trained her in the art of misdirection, a wave of one hand to draw attention while the other prepared the real attack, a stumble that looked like weakness but was actually positioning. Words designed to anger an opponent, to make them stupid and predictable. The guards who watched these sessions were puzzled. The human was teaching the princess to cheat. There was no honor in these techniques, no glory. A true warrior faced their enemy directly, strength against strength. Anything else was cowardice. Marcus heard their whispers and ignored them. Honor was a luxury for those who could afford it. Survival was for everyone else. As the training continued, something remarkable began to happen. Liara was changing, not just her skills, but her entire being. The hesitation was leaving her movements. The doubt was fading from her eyes. She stood straighter, spoke louder, moved with a confidence that she had never shown before. The shame lines on her skin began to fade. Among Valorians, these marks were supposed to be permanent, a reminder of failure that lasted a lifetime. But Liara's body was rejecting them, healing itself as if it had finally decided that she was worthy of respect. The other members of the royal family noticed. Her 3 brothers, all successful warriors with their own conquests and victories, watched her transformation with disbelief. They had mocked her for years, called her names, suggested that she be removed from the line of succession. Now they were not so sure. Prince Thoral, the eldest brother, confronted Marcus one evening in the training grounds. He towered over the human, his massive body blocking out the light of the twin suns. He demanded to know what tricks the human was using, what forbidden technology or drugs were changing his sister. Marcus looked up at the prince without fear. He said there were no tricks, only teaching. He said that Liara had always been capable of greatness. She just needed someone to show her the path. Thoral did not believe him. He reached down and grabbed Marcus by the throat, lifting him off the ground with one hand. The guard stepped back, unwilling to interfere with a prince. Thoral squeezed, his clawed fingers digging into the soft human flesh. Marcus did not struggle. He met the prince's eyes and smiled, even as his air was cut off. And then Thoral felt something sharp press against his side, just below his armor. He looked down and saw a tiny blade in the human's hand, positioned perfectly at the gap between his chest plates. One push, and it would pierce his secondary heart. Thoral dropped him immediately. He stared at the human with new eyes, trying to understand how this tiny creature had gotten a weapon and positioned it so perfectly without anyone noticing. It was impossible. He had been watching the whole time. Marcus coughed and rubbed his throat. He said that the prince should be more careful. Big targets were easy to hit. Then he walked away, leaving Thorol standing alone with his confusion and his wounded pride. Word of the encounter spread through the palace. The human had threatened a prince and walked away alive. This had never happened in the history of the empire. Some called for his execution. Others were curious, wanting to see what else this strange creature could do. Emperor Kralthax heard the reports but said nothing. He was watching, waiting, evaluating. The human was dangerous, yes, but he was also producing results. Liara was improving faster than anyone had expected. If the human could actually make her into a warrior, his methods did not matter. The emperor's enemies were also watching. The noble houses had been waiting for an opportunity to strike at the royal family, to expose its weakness and take power for themselves. The broken princess had been their best weapon, a symbol of the empire's declining strength. But now she was changing, and that was not acceptable. House Maldrek made the first move. They challenged Liara to a formal duel, invoking the ancient laws that could not be refused. Their champion was a warrior named Silas Maldrek, undefeated in over 200 battles, known throughout the empire as the Ghost Blade for his impossible speed. The duel was set for 1 month from the challenge. If Liara refused, she would be marked as a coward and stripped of her royal title. If she lost, she would die. There was no middle ground. When Liara heard the news, she felt the old fear trying to return. Silas was legendary. He had killed warriors twice her size, 3 times her skill. Everyone expected her to die. But then she looked at Marcus, and the fear began to fade. He did not seem worried. He seemed excited, as if this was exactly what he had been waiting for. Marcus told her that Silas was fast, yes, but speed could be predicted. Silas was experienced, yes, but experience could become routine. Every fighter had patterns, habits, weaknesses that they did not even know they had. Their job was to find those weaknesses before the duel. For the next month, they studied everything about Silas Maldrek. They watched recordings of his past battles, hundreds of them, over and over until Liara could see them with her eyes closed. Marcus taught her to look for the small things, the way Silas shifted his weight before a certain strike, the slight pause in his breathing when he was about to faint, the pattern of his footwork that repeated every 7 moves. Liara saw it all. She memorized it all. And slowly, the legendary Ghost Blade became just another puzzle to solve. The physical training intensified as well. Marcus pushed her harder than ever before, drilling the techniques that would work specifically against Silas. She practiced the same movements 1,000 times, 10,000 times, until they were burned into her muscles, until she could perform them without thinking. The night before the duel, Marcus sat with her in the training grounds. The palace was quiet, the twin moons casting silver light across the sand. He told her that she was ready. Not because she was strong enough to defeat Silas in a fair fight. She was not. But because she was not going to fight fair. Liara asked him if that was honorable, if winning through tricks and deception was truly victory. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he told her about another human concept, one that had guided his people through countless struggles. It was called survival, and survival did not care about honor. The dead could not enjoy their integrity. Only the living could decide what came next. He told her that she had spent her whole life being defeated by people who followed the rules. Now it was time to write new rules, her rules, and anyone who did not like it could try to stop her. Liara looked at her teacher, this strange creature from a distant world who had come into her life and changed everything. She did not know if she could win tomorrow. She did not know if she would live or die. But she knew one thing with absolute certainty. She was not afraid anymore. The arena was packed with spectators. Every noble house had sent representatives. Emperor Kralthax sat in the royal box, his face unreadable. Beside him sat Liara's brothers, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and contempt. House Maldrick was confident. They had placed heavy bets on their champion, expecting an easy victory. Silas stood in the arena, his twin blades gleaming in the light, his body moving with the fluid grace that had earned him his name. He looked at Liara and smiled, the smile of a predator who had already caught its prey. Liara entered the arena alone. Marcus was not allowed to accompany her. The rules forbade outside assistance once the duel began, but his voice was in her head, calm and steady, guiding her thoughts. She looked at Silas and did something that no one expected. She smiled back. The signal was given. The duel began. Silas moved like lightning, closing the distance in a heartbeat, his blades flashing toward her throat. It was his signature opening, the strike that had killed dozens of opponents before they could even react. Liara was not there. She had moved before he did, reading the shift in his weight that Marcus had shown her, sliding to the side at exactly the right moment. His blades cut only air. Silas recovered instantly, pressing his attack with a fury that should have overwhelmed any opponent. His speed was blinding, his technique was flawless. But every strike missed by inches. Every combination met empty space. Liara was always one step ahead, moving before he attacked, reading his body like a language she had studied her whole life. The crowd fell silent. They were watching something impossible. The broken princess was matching the ghost blade, not through strength or speed, but through something else entirely, something they had never seen before. Silas grew frustrated. He pushed harder, faster, abandoning his careful technique for raw aggression. This was exactly what Marcus had predicted. Angry fighters made mistakes. Liara saw the opening, the seventh footwork pattern, the one that always left his left side slightly exposed. She had been waiting for it. She had practiced for this moment 1,000 times. She struck, not at his body but at his knee, a precise surgical blow to the joint that even his armor could not fully protect. Silas stumbled, his perfect balance broken for just a moment. That moment was enough. Liara's second strike took his primary hand, severing the tendons that controlled his grip. His blade clattered to the ground. Her third strike was to his throat, stopping just short of the killing blow. The arena was absolutely silent. Silas Maldrick, the Ghost Blade, the undefeated champion of House Maldrick, was on his knees with the broken princess standing over him, her weapon at his throat. Liara looked up at the royal box, at her father's face. The emperor's expression had not changed, but something in his eyes was different, something that might have been pride. She withdrew her weapon and stepped back. Silas collapsed to the ground, alive but defeated. The duel was over. In the crowd, Marcus Cole watched with satisfaction. The princess had won her first real battle, but this was only the beginning. The galaxy was vast, and it was full of enemies who would not be as easy to defeat as a single champion. The real war was just starting. The victory over Silas Maldrick sent shockwaves through the Empire. House Maldrick demanded an investigation, claiming that the human had used forbidden technology or mind control to influence the duel. The Emperor ordered a full examination of both Liara and Marcus. No technology was found. No drugs, no implants. The victory was legitimate. This made things worse, not better. If the broken princess could defeat one of the greatest champions in the Empire through skill alone, what did that mean for everyone else? The noble houses had spent centuries building their power on the foundation of martial supremacy. Warriors were valued above all others. Strength decided everything. Now, a single human had proven that their entire system was flawed. The months following the duel brought more challenges. Every ambitious noble, every jealous warrior, every enemy of the royal family saw Liara as a target. If they could defeat her, they would prove that her victory was a fluke. If they could kill her, they would remove a threat to the established order. Liara faced them all, one after another. Champions from every corner of the empire came to test themselves against the princess who had broken their rules. Some were fast, some were strong, some were both. None of them succeeded. Marcus had taught her well. Each opponent brought a different challenge, and each challenge required a different solution. Against the massive warriors of House Thorn, she used mobility and precision, staying out of their reach while targeting their joints and pressure points. Against the twin fighters of House Varus, she turned them against each other, using positioning to force them into each other's way. Against the poison masters of the outer colonies, she wore hidden filters and waited for them to expose themselves to their own toxins. She became known by a new name, the Silver Ghost, a princess who could not be touched, who moved through battle like smoke, who destroyed her enemies without ever meeting them on their own terms. But victory bred resentment. The noble houses were losing too many champions. Their prestige was crumbling. Something had to be done. A secret meeting was held in the dark chambers of House Maldrek, now desperate for revenge after their champion's humiliation. Representatives from 12 noble houses attended, all of them bound by a common goal. The princess had to die, and if she could not be killed in honorable combat, then other methods would have to be used. They hired assassins from the Shadow Guild, the most feared killers in the galaxy. They paid a fortune, enough to buy entire planets, all for a single target. The princess would die, and the human who had created her would die with her. Marcus sensed the danger before it arrived. He had survived too many attempts on his own life to ignore the subtle signs. Guards who were replaced too quickly, servants who asked too many questions, the feeling of being watched by eyes that wished him harm. He warned Liara. She wanted to report the conspiracy to her father, to let the Imperial forces handle the threat. Marcus advised against it. The Shadow Guild had operated for thousands of years, precisely because they could not be stopped by conventional means. If Liara showed weakness now, if she relied on others to protect her, the perception of her power would crumble. All the victories she had won would mean nothing. She had to face this threat herself. They prepared together, turning Liara's quarters into a fortress of traps and hidden defenses. Marcus taught her the ways of counter-assassination, techniques that humans had developed over centuries of internal conflict. Where to sleep, how to move, what to eat, who to trust. Every moment became a calculation, every interaction a potential threat. The assassins came on a night of celebration. The Empire was commemorating the anniversary of Emperor Kralthax's coronation, and the entire palace was filled with guests. Security was stretched thin. Attention was divided. It was the perfect moment to strike. There were 7 of them, each a master of their craft. They moved through the palace like ghosts, killing guards silently, disabling sensors, opening doors that should have been locked. They had studied the layout for months. They knew every patrol route, every blind spot, every vulnerability. What they did not know was that Liara was waiting for them. She had positioned herself in the garden where Marcus had first taught her to observe. The plants here were alive with tiny creatures, and she had learned their patterns so well that she could feel any disturbance in their behavior. When the first assassin entered, creeping through the shadows with supernatural stealth, the garden insects fell silent. Liara struck without warning. Her blade took the assassin through the throat before he even knew she was there. One down. The second and third came together, alerted by the death of their companion. They were faster than any warrior she had faced before, their movements enhanced by technology and training that the Shadow Guild kept secret. But fast meant nothing if you could not find your target. Liara used the garden against them. She had spent hours mapping every path, every hiding spot, every angle of attack. She appeared behind them, between them, above them, striking and vanishing before they could respond. The garden became a killing field, and she was its master. 2 more down, the remaining 4 assassins regrouped. They abandoned stealth and moved together, covering each other, searching systematically for their target. They were professionals, and they would not make the same mistakes. But Liara had learned from Marcus that sometimes the best strategy was to let your enemies think they were winning. She retreated, leaving obvious signs of her passage, drawing them deeper into the palace. They followed, confident that they were closing in. They entered the throne room. It was empty, the celebration having moved to other parts of the palace. The massive chamber stretched out before them, dimly lit by the glow of ancient crystals, the perfect place for an ambush. Except Liara was not hiding. She stood in the center of the room, alone, her blade at her side. She was inviting them to attack. The assassins spread out, surrounding her from 4 directions. They moved in perfect coordination, closing the trap. There was nowhere for her to run. Liara smiled. She had been practicing this moment for weeks. As they attacked, she triggered the mechanism that Marcus had helped her install. The floor panels shifted, breaking their formation. The lights flickered in a pattern designed to disorient enhanced vision. And Liara moved, not away from them, but toward them. She had learned that assassins were trained to kill targets who ran or hid. They were not prepared for targets who charged directly into their attacks. It disrupted their timing, confused their instincts, created openings that should not exist. She killed the 4th assassin with his own weapon, stripped from his hand in a technique that Marcus had drilled into her 1,000 times. The 5th died when she used the 4th's falling body as a shield, closing the distance while her enemy was blocked. The 6th hesitated for just a moment, shocked by what he was seeing, and that hesitation cost him his life. The 7th assassin was the leader. He was older than the others, more experienced, more dangerous. He did not panic or hesitate. He adjusted his strategy instantly, recognizing that this was not the weak princess he had been told about. They fought in the center of the throne room, blade against blade, skill against skill. He was better than anyone she had faced before. His attacks came from angles she had not anticipated. His defenses were solid, without the patterns or weaknesses she usually exploited. For the first time since her training began, Liara felt doubt creeping back. This enemy was beyond her. She was going to lose. Then she heard Marcus's voice in her memory. When you face someone stronger, faster, and more skilled, what do? You change the game. Liara stopped fighting. She dropped her blade and stood still, arms at her sides, completely defenseless. The assassin froze, confused by the sudden surrender. It was a trap. It had to be. But where? What was she planning? In that moment of hesitation, Liara spoke. She told the assassin that she knew who had hired him. She knew about the secret meeting, the 12 houses, the conspiracy against the throne. She had been gathering evidence for weeks, and it was already in her father's hands. If the assassin killed her now, it would change nothing. The conspiracy would be exposed, and every house involved would be destroyed. But if the assassin let her live, she could offer him something better than the payment he had received. She could offer him protection, a place in her personal guard, a future in the new order that she was building. The assassin studied her face, looking for the lie. He found none, because there was none. Liara had learned from Marcus that the truth was often the most powerful weapon of all. Slowly, the assassin lowered his blade. He asked what guarantee he had that she would keep her word. Liara told him that he had no guarantee. He had only her promise, given freely, that she would honor their agreement. She had spent her entire life being judged by others, being told that she was worthless. She would not do the same to him. He would be judged by his actions, not by his past. The assassin made his choice. He knelt before her, his blade on the ground, his head bowed. He pledged his service to the Silver Ghost. When Emperor Kralthax arrived with his guards, summoned by the alerts of combat in the palace, he found his daughter standing in the throne room surrounded by the bodies of the most feared assassins in the galaxy. One of them knelt at her feet, sworn to her service. The Emperor looked at his daughter and saw something he had never seen before: a leader. A warrior. A threat to everything the old ways represented. And he was proud. The conspiracy was exposed. The 12 noble houses were stripped of their titles and their wealth. Some were executed, others were exiled. House Meldrek was destroyed entirely, its name erased from history. The message was clear. No one challenged the royal family. No one threatened the Silver Ghost. In the aftermath, Liara found Marcus in the training grounds where they had spent so many hours together. He was packing his belongings, preparing to leave. She asked him where he was going. Marcus told her that his work was done. She did not need a teacher anymore. She had surpassed everything he could give her. Now it was time for her to find her own path. Liara did not accept this answer. She ordered him to stay, not as a prisoner, not as a servant, but as an advisor, a friend. She told him that the Empire was changing, and she needed people who could see the world differently, people who did not accept the old rules, people like him. Marcus was quiet for a long time. He had been a soldier, a prisoner, a teacher. He had never been offered a place where he truly belonged. The galaxy was vast, and he had no home to return to. Earth was far away, and the life he had known there was gone. He accepted. Years passed. Liara became the most feared warrior in the Valorian Empire, not because of her strength or her speed, but because of her mind. She revolutionized military strategy, incorporating human concepts that had never been seen in the galaxy before. She built a network of allies who valued intelligence over brute force. She became the voice of change in an empire that had remained static for millennia. When Emperor Kralthax finally died, there was no question of succession. Liara's brothers bowed to her without complaint. The noble houses accepted her rule without resistance. No one dared challenge the Silver Ghost. No one wanted to face the warrior who had rewritten the rules of combat. Marcus stood beside her throne on the day of her coronation, watching as the crown was placed on her silver head. He was old now, by human standards, but the years had been kind to him. The Empire had extended his life with technology that his own people had not yet discovered. He might live for centuries more. Liara looked at him and smiled. She asked him what he was thinking. Marcus told her that he was thinking about Earth, about the small, fragile world where his people still struggled against the vastness of space. He told her that someday humans would reach the stars in numbers. They would meet the other species of the galaxy, and when they did, they would need friends. Liara understood what he was asking. She made a promise that day, witnessed by the entire Empire. When humanity was ready, when they came seeking their place among the stars, the Valorian Empire would welcome them. They would be protected, guided, given the chance to grow into their full potential, because a single human had shown her what they were capable of. The galaxy would never be the same. In the centuries that followed, historians would debate how the Empire had changed so dramatically. They would point to political shifts, economic factors, technological developments. But those who knew the truth told a different story. They told the story of a broken princess who was given a human teacher. They told of a small, fragile creature from a primitive world who carried within him the accumulated wisdom of his entire species. They told of lessons learned in a garden, of strategies born from desperation, of a new way of thinking that challenged everything the galaxy believed about power. And they told of the warrior who emerged from that teaching, the Silver Ghost, the Empress who could not be defeated, the leader who united an empire and prepared it for the future. All because an alien king sent a human to his daughter. All because humans refused to accept that they were weak. The galaxy learned to respect that refusal, and anyone who forgot the lesson learned it again the hard way. No one dared challenge the warrior queen. No one ever would.